Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mang. We're going to be doing some more solo role Manging. I have a feeling this is going to be the last sort of system I look at during this whole lengthy spurt of solo RPG stuff, which has been going on now for like over 3 weeks. Because there's not really any other system that I have interest in looking at the moment. But we do have one more that I just picked up. Tales of Argosa. So I talked a little bit about this during some previous videos when I was doing Shadow Dark. And this one kind of just... I mean, it's just recently kind of was released. So there's that. It's pretty new. I had not heard of it before like a week ago. But I picked it up. And so far I like a lot of what I am seeing. So we're going to go through the rule book. Character creation. We're going to skim some other sections, talk about it. And then we're going to go into Ironwood Gorge, which is a module. I mean, it's not super old. It's not like 40 years old, but it's relatively old for Labyrinth Lord. And I started that with Shadow Dark for a little bit, and then I was like, why don't we switch this over to Tales of Argosa? And I think we're actually going to start that module over, so we can kind of directly compare the opening there. Alright, so Tales of Argosa is actually the second edition of a game called Low Fantasy Gaming. So the guy responsible for this, Steven Grodzicki, from what I understand from comments, he made Low Fantasy Gaming as a system after mostly just playing 5th edition D&D, and I guess he wanted a grittier, more old school, lower fantasy version of 5e, and so that was Low Fantasy Gaming. And I had never heard of Low Fantasy Gaming ever, and I am in circles of RPG discussion, fantasy RPG discussion, and stuff like that. I had never heard of it, so must not have been super popular. Probably partly due to the name really not being very evocative. I think plenty of people like low fantasy, but just as a title, it's a little... yeah, I don't know. It's not super eye-catchy. Tales of Argosa definitely is better, but as I said before, I still don't know if it's that great of a title because it feels a bit more... it feels a bit too specific of like a setting name or something like that. I don't know anything about Argosa, and it feels like if I play this game, I'm going to be tied to your specific Argosa setting you want me to play in. And that's not really the case. I mean, the bestiary does have a bunch of kind of specific things. I'll tell you right now, it doesn't have orcs in it. There are no orcs in the bestiary. There are creatures that are basically orcs, but they're not orcs. They're called like Scorn or something. So, yeah, I don't know how well Tales of Argosa is going to end up doing, like commercially or anything like that. But the rules that I've looked at so far and everything seem to indicate a pretty cool game. So, we'll see. So, let's just get into it. This rulebook is 265 pages long, so it's decently hefty, but it's not insane or anything. It's probably pretty standard for like a not insanely crunchy game that has both player handbook and DM guide in one. And yeah. So, what is Tales of Argosa? Sword and Sorcery inspired emergent play adventure game for groups or solo. And yeah, it has a whole section devoted to solo rules, which is pretty surprising, but it is the 21st century, I suppose. So it's intended to be a mix of old and new. And I think technically we'd probably wrap this all up in what some people call the new SR compared to the old school Renaissance. So this is like the new school Renaissance, which are games that definitely are inspired in many ways by old school D&D and sort of the general mentality and genre and philosophy of the OSR, which is usually focused on rulings over rules and generally higher lethality, important, a high degree of player agency, things like that. And this isn't really an OSR game because, I mean, it depends on your definition, of course. But most would say that the OSR has to be kind of either a direct retro clone of an actual D&D rule set, either original D&D, BX D&D, first edition AD&D, one of those. Or heavily based around one of those rule sets to the point of like direct compatibility. Whereas new SR just has to be kind of inspired by it. It doesn't really have to have direct compatibility. So that's games like Maze Rats, Knave, Karn, Shadow Dark. Many of these games are pretty compatible with old school modules and stuff, but they just differ in a lot of ways. Shadow Dark is kind of on the knife's edge, though. I think people go back and forth on what it is. This one, I feel, though, kind of pretty new SR. There's a lot of modern concepts here. But battle is fast, brutal, and exciting. Any sword swing might lead to fractured bones or severed limbs. The specter of death is ever present. Yep, feels very old school. Dread to sorcery. Argosan sorcery is not only rare, it is dark and inherently dangerous. Be it arcane spell or divine blessing, magic is a power not meant for mortals. So, yeah, every spell you cast does carry a risk in this system. Kind of like Warhammer Fantasy or something like that. That's going to be hit or miss with people, especially once you see the effects that can happen from just casting spells. It is a little gonzo. It is a little like over the top. You're going to like sprout tentacles out of your arm and stuff like that. And that's probably going to be hit or miss with some groups. Just kind of like, I mean, it's obviously like horrific, but it's also like, all right, that's a bit much. But I know that like DCC is also the same way, so Argosa is designed for short, sharp adventures in a sandbox world. GM offers rumors and hooks, but the players decide where to go and what to do, which tales to investigate, factions to interact with, places to explore, etc. Yeah, so this is sort of designed for the hex crawl. There are rules there for hexploration, hexes, traveling, weather in a hex. It's all kind of meant to be based around an open sandbox hex crawl, which I like. I mean, if I'm going to run a game like this, OSR or OSR adjacent, I'm either just running individual modules or I'm going to make a whole hex crawl and just plop in modules and stuff like that around. So that is all good. And it encourages the DM rolling in the open. I kind of go back and forth on that whole concept. And a lot of people are very, very strictly against any fudging of dice, especially in the OSR community. It's hot button issue if it's brought up. Because they say if you're gonna fudge dice, then what's the point of rolling? Why even roll? Just pick the result that you want and just say that's what happens, because clearly you have like a story in mind. You're not being an impartial judge. You're just deciding the story that you want to have happen. I think that's a little bit of an extreme take. And I don't typically fudge dice rolls for when I DM, but occasionally, yeah, I will. Occasionally I will. If I think that it makes for a more enjoyable game. Yeah, I understand I'm supposed to be impartial, but frankly, that's impossible. No DM in the history of anything has ever been completely impartial, because humans are incapable of that. But I have DM'd and rolled out in the open. I've done it, and, it's just like, for whatever reason, when I do that, I feel like I roll a lot of crits suddenly, and it's like, well, there you go. But that's how some people want it, how they demand it. I don't know. Anyways. Core features. D20 based, obviously. 9 different classes: Artificer, Barbarian, Bard, Cultist, Fighter, Monk, Ranger, Rogue, Magic user. Only 2 of which involve magic. So again, pointing to that low fantasy, which usually does mean low magic. That's how most people just interpret it. So, yeah, there's not a lot of magic. And the Cultist, which is kind of the cleric, doesn't actually get spellcasting. He gets, like, divine blessings or something like that, but he can't really pick them. And yeah, it's definitely not extensive. There's a very low chance that he'll get like a healing blessing. So if you want to be like a cleric that actually heals people, you're gonna have to go with magic user, which is kind of wild. But yeah, 9th level max, kind of an odd choice. Seems a little arbitrary. I don't know why, but sure, 9th level. Flatter HP curve. Most characters are going to have approximately 10 to 40 hit points over their 9 levels. Yeah, that keeps it pretty flat and makes it so that enemies dealing 1d6 damage are very dangerous early on. Pretty dangerous early on, and then still kind of a threat somewhat in numbers later on. Unique features. Every 3rd level, you get to design an ability for your character. There are examples, but yeah, anything that you can kind of come up with that would be a cool ability or trait or feat, as long as your DM approves it and everything, go ahead. I think that's a great concept. Really excited to try that at some point. Attribute checks are roll under. So if you have a 16 strength and you do a strength check, you're trying to get 16 or under on a d20. So it does make every stat point matter compared to just like bumping up 2 points and, trying to increase your modifier. There is a skill list. I have limited interest in skill lists these days, but thankfully it's not that bad. They're pretty minor, and most characters are just going to have a few of the skills, and they just, improve. It's almost like a background, basically. Wisdom's gone. Instead, you have willpower and perception. And perception is actually used for ranged attacks instead of dexterity, which is obviously in an effort to lower the usefulness of dexterity, which is often the best stat in any, fantasy D20 game like this. Exploits. These are kind of like Mighty Deeds of Arms from Dungeon Crawl Classics. These are like improvised maneuvers that you can do as part of your attacks, ranging from tripping somebody to like swinging off a chandelier and kicking someone off a cliff, or also anything you can kind of think of. It's very improvised. It's often regarded as one of the better features of Dungeon Crawl Classics. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see more games doing that. Fast initiative. Only 1 player rolls for the whole party every round. And if they succeed, they go first. Otherwise, monsters go first. That is very quick, and that's every round, so you're never quite sure. That does allow for double turns, much like Axe. Axe has that by default, and Shadow Dark, when we were playing solo, we were re-rolling every round. I'm getting used to that. I kind of like it. I kind of dig the swinginess of it. Axe is especially crazy because everyone re-rolls every round and you just never are sure. But this is just still kind of like what we were doing. It's just side-based, but it could allow for double turns. There's a luck stat. We'll get to that. There's natural 19 effects. So if you roll a 19 on your attack roll, you get a special like trauma effect you apply instead of a crit. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Unbalanced encounters is a feature. You gotta love that. Short rests are actually in here. After combat, you can take a short rest. Yeah, a bunch of other stuff. Let's keep moving. We'll skip over a lot of these basic concepts and get to character creation. So, rolling a d12 for race between human, dwarf, elf, halfling, or half scorn. Which again is like half orc. But there are no... You can't play as a scorn. You can only play as a half scorn. Then rolling for your background. These are actually going to increase one of your attributes by 1. Up to a max of 16. You get a skill out of that, or a couple skills out of that. One of the two. And you get an item. So if you roll and you're a ditch digger, you get +1 strength, you get the athletics skill, and you get a shovel. Pretty simple, pretty quick. It's they call it a D66. It's not a D66. It's not a dice with 66 sides. You're rolling a 6 and then a 6 and lining up the number there. And you get attributes 3d6 7 times down the line. But you have to have at least one attribute of 13 and one of 15 or higher. And you can increase attributes to reach those points. And then you can also swap any 2 attribute scores. So it's down the line, but it's pretty generous. Honestly, I still prefer Axe of 5d6, 4d6, 4d6, 3d6, 3d6, 3d6. But I think this probably is going to result in pretty similar numbers by and large, and it's a lot better than just 3d6 straight down the line. The classes, luck, blah, 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 and then we derive a bunch of stuff, class abilities, gear, yeah, so on and so forth. Okay. So, most of these stats are pretty obvious. Don't really need to know all these things. Dex contributes to your initiative score. Your initiative score is actually the average of your dex and intelligence, which I think is pretty interesting. You'd think it was perception, but I guess they didn't want to make that too powerful. Int grants bonus language, helps your initiative. I guess that, yeah, also, intelligence often is like a dumb stat for a lot of characters. So I guess throwing it into initiative is helpful, but remember, only one person has to roll initiative, so it's really just who's going to be whoever has the highest. Perception is range attack, detecting ambushes, picking up clues others might miss. Willpower is sort of most of the other sort of wisdom-related things. But it also governs your capacity to rally between encounters. That's what you use during short rests to kind of determine how well you rest and recover afterwards. Yeah, and then there are modifiers. It is a roll under system for attribute checks, but you still have modifiers because of luck. So luck is not rolled or anything like that. Everyone is going to have a luck of 11 at the start of every adventure. I don't typically like to break up things based on an adventure, because I feel like that's always a little nebulous. It really depends. Like, obviously, okay, we're going to go into this 8-room dungeon because we have a quest and we're going to go in there and do it. And it's like, okay, it's pretty clear where the start and end to this adventure is. But, like, what about Barrow Maze? What the fuck is the start and end of if I was running Barrow Maze? Would it just be, like, every time they go back to town? Because that's not really a good way to do it. Is it just every session? Maybe, but then luck becomes pretty powerful. if it resets every session. Because what luck is it's basically the save. If there's really any kind of save that you have to do, you're going to be rolling luck. So you're going to be rolling under your luck, which means by default it's essentially a 50-50. I think it's 55-45 or something like that. But a lot of saves are going to be attached to a attribute, like a luck dex save, in which case you would add your dex modifier to your luck number. So if you had a +2 dex, then instead of luck 11, it would be luck 13. And you got to roll equal to or under 13. So that's going to be most of the time, most of what you're doing with luck. But there are some other times where you're just rolling pure luck, if it's not affected by anything in particular. And I think you also are rolling it if you're trying to do major exploits in combat, or a rescue exploit, something like that. You know, or sometimes, like Dungeon Crawl Classics, you might just want to roll... The DM might have everyone roll luck and see who fails, you know, and there might be something bad that happens to who fails by the largest margin, or, you know, basically it's just... And I do that plenty with every system, where it's just like, okay, everyone roll a d20 and we'll see who rolls the lowest. So I gotta pick somebody, so there you go. But every time you succeed on a luck roll, your luck attribute is reduced by 1 point, down to a minimum of 5. So as you use up your luck in that way, and you're surviving, and you know, you're succeeding just by luck, pure luck, you know, it runs out, and it gets harder and harder to rely on your luck. It returns at a rate of 1 point per long rest. A long rest in this game is like 7 days of basically uninterrupted rest in a safe location. So you're not really going to rely on that too much to bring back your luck in the middle of an adventure. So most of the time, it's just your luck lasts through the adventure, and then it resets back to 11, or half your level rounded up. So eventually, when you hit level 9, you'll have 15 luck at the start of an adventure. Quite a bit, but usually at that point, you're like ready to start a new campaign anyways. Yeah, anyways. So that's luck. As for races, humans get +1 max reroll. We'll get to what exactly a reroll is in a bit, but yes, there is a built-in system to reroll certain dice rolls. I think it's mostly based on, like, your skills. I don't think you can reroll any, like, attack check or anything like that, attack roll. It's mostly, like, rerolling skill attempts and rerolling luck rolls and rerolling class ability rolls. So humans get an extra one of those, and during character creation, you get +1 to an attribute of your choice. Again, to a max of 16. I think you can just never go... you can definitely go above 16, just not at character creation. Dwarves get advantage on resisting poison and magic, blah, blah, blah. But positive magical effects provide only half the usual benefits, such as getting healed or buffs or something. That's pretty wild to think, but sure. I haven't seen that before. Make perception check to sniff out coins or a gemstone nearby, and you may have to do will check to resist new opportunities for riches or to keep from retaliating against a perceived slight. Okay. Elves get advantage on all dex checks and defensive dex saves, luck dex saves. Pretty damn powerful. That's a very powerful trait. But they get disadvantage on all luck con saves and con checks. Very easy to get poisoned or something like that. They also have the trance, where they can be on lookout duty during it, but may have to do will checks to resist engaging with sights of great natural beauty or to demonstrate elven superiority or disinterest when the opportunity arises. I usually don't like things that a DM just has to remember like that. Just like, oh yeah, you're an elf. Let me remember to fuck you over. But I think it's kind of an interesting concept. Halflings get advantage on stealth-related checks. Pretty great. But all disadvantage on all strength-related checks. Except for melee attacks and stuff. Okay, I mean, it's fair. It doesn't really allow for the brawny bodybuilder halfling, but okay. Increase starting luck and AC by 1 point, unless you're wearing heavy armor. PC allies within sight or hearing also increase their luck by 1. That's pretty good. Can't wield any large weapons. 2 hands to use longswords or similarly moderately sized weapon. And their lifestyle costs are doubled because they love comforts like rich foods, alcohol, pipeweed, and sleep. May require a will check to resist prying nature or to curb potential indulgence. And then half scorn get advantage on all strength tests, except for melee stuff, and to resist disease and parasites, but disadvantage on all intelligence-related checks, except for spellcasting and initiative. Well, that's nice of them. +2 bonus on death saves. You might have to do a will check to resist showing dominance or fearlessness in the face of an overt threat or challenge. So humans, you know, pretty basic, but they don't have any downsides. Yeah, you know, it's pretty good. I think humans are solid here. But there's definitely a reason to take some of these other characters, depending on your build and stuff. All right, classes. All first level PCs start with hit points equal to con score plus class HP bonus, which is going to be 1, 2, or 3 per level. So, yeah, no rolling for hit die or anything like that. It's pretty much every class is going to have like 10 to 16, 18 maybe hit points, somewhere in that range. When you level up, you get +1 to an attribute of your choice. You get more hit points. Oh, it is up to max 16. Interesting. So they put these modifiers in here, and you can't even get that without some sort of exceptional circumstance. Interesting. Yeah, okay. So, Artificer. It's a very bold choice, I think, in your low fantasy game to put the first class as Artificer, who can make black powder weapons and flash rigs and hellfire glass and thunder gauntlets. I mean, yeah, I suppose it is sort of low magic. It's tech instead. But I was pretty surprised when I saw this as the first class. Okay, so Alchema and Mechanica, first level, they can roll on this D12 table based on their int mod, and they have to have a minimum of 15 intelligence and a max of 16, so it's either a 15 or a 16, which means either way it's a +2. Yeah, you're gonna have +2, so you're gonna get 2 of these things at level 1, and then every level after that you get another one. You can't pick, and that's going to be a running theme with practically all the classes, because almost I think all the classes have this kind of D12 table that they have to roll on. Most of the classes. And you can't pick, so it's like you may want the chain tooth weapon, but unless you roll a 2, you ain't getting that. So eventually you're going to have... Let's see, you start with 2 and you're going to get 8 more. So you're going to get 10 of the 12. So you're going to get most of them. I'm not going to go through one by one here, but like the black powder weapon, it's basically like a musket, sort of. It's two-handed, far range, 4d4 damage, which is not bad at all, really. It reloads as a crossbow. Damage dice are exploding. Okay, well that's the especially like insane thing. Exploding dice on D4s, and you get 4 of them. So, I mean, I think on average that's at least 5 D4 every time you fire it. But firing is loud. On a fumble, a critical failure, it malfunctions, rendering it as a club until repaired. And if it's ever lost or destroyed, you can make a replacement. That's pretty damn solid, I gotta say. Chain Tooth weapon is a 2-handed melee, 2d4 plus 1, and damage dice are exploding. So it's not gonna do quite as much, but it is a melee weapon. It is also loud, and it can be rendered as a club. I'd probably rather have the black powder weapon, because I think that's fucking badass. But a chain sword, it's not bad. It's not bad. Some of these other things, though, like a breathing mask, I'd be pretty disappointed if I got breathing mask and, like, I don't know. What else would be really lame? Iron word or truth serum, I guess. Yeah, if I got breathing mask, truth serum, I'd be like, fuck. Can I re-roll my character? You know? I find it a little curious that it doesn't say roll 1d12 or choose, you know, or choose. I could see maybe, well, all the level up ones you get to choose. So there is that. All you have to do is get to level 2, which is not honestly that long of a process in this game, I don't think. And then you can pick whichever one you want. And let's be honest, for most people, it's going to be that fucking black powder weapon. It'd be sweet. You begin each adventure with 1 use of this ability per level. And I think that applies to things that are actually used. Yeah. Black powder weapon. You may wield it like a weapon. Does not require expending uses of Alchema and Mechanica. So that's going to be stuff like the Hellfire Glass or the Breathing Mask or the Iron Word. You know, most of this stuff. But that's why black powder weapon's so good. The Mutagen. Gain a random benefit for 2d6 rounds. So this can increase your strength, and dex to 17. Spit poison. Heal 1d10 each round at the end of your turn. Some good stuff in there. But once it expires, make an int check or suffer a toxin trauma for 1d6 hours. You also get a level 1 troubleshooter. Once per point of int modifier per adventure, you may attempt to improvise a jury-rigged device or ad hoc mixture to bypass a current obstacle, disarm a trap, or assist the party in some other way. Some examples might include a primitive but serviceable parachute, acid that melts a lock in a few moments before turning inert, one-shot flare gun or magnetic grapple, or a fusing agent to bind 2 objects together or to climb a sheer wall. The devices and mixtures are temporary and makeshift, lasting up to 1d4 hours at best. At the GM's option, highly improbable or complex items might also cost 1 point of luck. And a GM determines whether a proposed item is possible in the circumstances and how long it takes to create. And you do have to succeed on a successful int check. But you can reroll stuff like that because it's a class ability. I mean, this ability I think is fucking awesome. I love shit like that, where it's just limited only by your creativity and a roll. And your GM not being an asshole. Bypass a current obstacle, disarm a trap, or assist the party in some other way. Yeah, I mean, that's extremely open-ended. Very good. So for pretty much most classes, your stuff you get at level 1 is kind of the defining features. For the Artificer, 3rd, 6th, 9th Just like every other class, you get a unique feature that you can design yourself. At 2nd, 5th, 8th level, you get one new skill, which doesn't even need to be on your class list. Also at 5th level, you get a major breakthrough, a new discovery. So you can do field repairs, you can make a replacement limb, and you get another... You create a new alchemy and mechanica invention, adding it to your known abilities. Again, it's just like anything that you can kind of think of, as long as your DM approves it. Bada bing, bada boom. If you want to make a fucking rocket launcher, make a fucking rocket launcher. And my advice would be to make a fucking rocket launcher. I love it. I love all this stuff. I love like just the free-form nature of that and just enabling player creativity and stuff. I think it's great. I'm a sucker for stuff like that, though, and it's like any game could really do that. I just like that it's baked in here. And then if you go beyond 9th level, you retire as Master Mechanica to an artificing facility, complete with a mine, forge, workshop, laboratory, and several dutiful apprentices. So, yeah, the game definitely does not have domain play, because you are retired. You're not intending to do anything. You make a new character at that point. But I think at that point, if you go that far, like you are a feature of the setting at that point of your campaign. You are a known important figure at that point. Yeah, so I don't know if we're going to go through all the classes in this kind of detail, but I think the Artificer is one of the more unique options here, and I think it's pretty sweet. I think it is pretty sweet. We may end up going with one of these. So they do have, obviously, restrictions for equipment. One-handed weapons like crossbow slings and their alchemy and mechanica weapons. Light and medium armor, no shield. Starting gear. Every class has starting gear. If I was going to run this... yeah, I'd be making templates. I'd go at the axe route and 100% make templates. And honestly, for like Artificer, the templates would include their starting gear, skills, and probably alchemy and mechanica choices as well. Since you're rolling that anyways. And templates would allow you to take a lower option if you want. Like, if you really want the black powder weapon, you might go for a lower template just to snag that. But templates allow for a big degree of different starting gear and clothing and just kind of unique flavor to your character before you even begin the game. And also is just a lot faster. I mean, I think character creation here is pretty fast, because really a lot of this is set in stone or just rolled randomly. Your skills are rolled randomly. The alchemy mechanica rolled randomly. So, yeah. But, yeah, I like templates a lot. Alright, Barbarian. Obviously a classic. It's a fucking Barbarian. Not a whole lot to go over here. All weapons except crossbows. Light armor, medium armor, shields. Start with a great axe and hide armor. They get Ferocious Rage. One use of this ability per level, per adventure. And basically, whenever they do an action in combat, they can expend a use of their rage in order to activate one of these effects. So, and you regain those uses by taking short or long rests. You're not going to take a short rest, I don't think, after every combat, because it has to be a significant combat. But I would imagine a lot of the time that's going to be most combat. So you're usually going to have it once per battle at level 1. So you can gain a +2 bonus on melee attack, damage rolls, luck rolls, and reroll any critical fails for a number of rounds equal to your con mod. If you fail a strength check, attempting to defeat a physical power, except for attacks, you can re-roll it. It does not cost a re-roll. You can trigger to reduce damage that you take by half one time. After you do damage with a melee weapon, you can attempt a con check to also inflict a relevant trauma roll. And you can attempt a con check to shrug off a mental effect, magical or otherwise. So obviously, most of the time, this is going to be the classic rage of +2 on attack and damage rolls and luck rolls and reroll critical fails. But it does last a pretty low amount of time. I mean, that's probably going to be like 2 rounds for you. But, you know, that's at level 1. Once you're level 3, it could be 3 times per fight or something like that. So it's not, like, 13th Age is more like the goal of every barbarian, every combat is to get into a rage and then stay in the rage the entire battle until the next battle. And you're just a creature of rage. This barbarian, a little bit more subdued, not constantly triggering it most of the time. They also get Wildborn, +1 advantage on wilderness lore checks, and light armor grants +3 AC instead of +1, and ignores skill penalties for medium armor. That's why their hide armor that they get to start is +3 AC. Eventually you get Sixth Sense, making con checks whenever they're ambushed or surprised. On a great success, they may act normally. Great success is kind of like a crit, but not really. It's much more generous than that. They get a second attack at 5th level, and expanded crit range. Yeah. Bards. Obviously, a much more martial bard than like a 5th edition D&D bard. Can use all weapons. They start with a spear and chain shirt. They get Inspire Greatness, much like barbarians, pretty much once per fight. And this applies to allies, applying a bonus equal to your charisma modifier on any single roll, and you can use it after seeing the result of the roll, which is awesome. And you can also use it on your own roll as long as someone is around to hear you, which is funny. If an ally has suffered an adverse magical effect for at least one round, they may attempt a second luck save to end it, but it lowers their luck score by 2 points instead of 1. And if an ally goes to 0 HP, they can do an immediate melee or range attack against their opponent. So, going down swinging, I guess. They also get Silver-Tongued, skilled in the art of soliciting rumors, gossip, and other intel. Gain advantage when using gather information skill, when performing to entertain or inspire, when using either persuasion or deception skill, choose one. So they're still, yeah, a very charismatic class, but they're not slinging spells when they're not doing that kind of stuff. They're not doing vicious mockery and things like that. So they're mainly just like a martial class. They got a decent hit point number. They can use all weapons. They can use medium armor and shields, you know. So they're going to be fighting, but it's like they're also the face of the party and have Inspire Greatness, which mostly is probably going to be that charisma modifier bonus to rolls that just need that little edge to scoot them over. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a pretty solid class. The problem for me is I like to be charismatic, I like to be the face of the party, but I have to have magic. I can't play a character that doesn't have magic. So. Yeah, but they seem, yeah, like they're meant to be like the leader of the party. Like, kind of a paladin figure, a little bit, but more like a commander or something from, 13th Age or the Warlord or something from 4th edition D&D. Cultist. Very unique name. Again, I was like, okay, this is the name of your cleric priest character, cultist. You're a cultist, devoted servant of a god, demon, or other cosmic entity, distant and inscrutable. You might be a pious priestess, an unflinching inquisitor, or a haunted warlock struggling to avert a terrible doom. So they can use bludgeoning weapons, any weapons sacred to the cult's ethos, which is up to the DM. They can medium armor and shields. They start with a heavy mace, chain shirt. You know, they're very classic cleric stuff here. It's just they're called cultists, which is gonna throw some people off, I think. You gotta choose the deity you serve, and there's a bunch of example deities here for Argosa. And then you get another D12 list here of things that you can do once per level and regain expended uses during short or long rests. So unless known or otherwise, attempting to invoke a blessing is similar to casting a spell. Generally requires an action, possibly a will check. So, Blessed Weapon. Cause a weapon to count as magical, +1 to attack rolls for 1d6 times 10 minutes. Holy Smite. When you hit with a melee attack, you can cause max weapon damage plus your level, and it's a magical hit. But that's only once per combat. Sense Abominations. Within far range. Turn Undead. But it also is turn undead, aberrations, or demons within far range. Other than that, it's pretty classic, kind of. Turn undead. It's just you cannot target anything that has more hit dice than you, or is a higher level than you. Which is a bit of a bummer, but yeah. Watch over. You and all your allies within close range gain +1 AC as long as you're above 0 HP and do not require atonement. Once known, this blessing is always active. It's a nice one to snag at level 1. You get basically the command ability, and then you get spell-like blessings. So these are just literally the names of spells we'll look at. Mend Flesh is like the only actual healing spell in the game. So, you know, if you want to be a cleric that heals, like a classic fantasy character, you need to roll a 7 on your d12. Otherwise, you're not getting that till level 2. Or just play a magic user. You also roll against will rather than int on checks related to divine lore, holy or unholy, including deities, undead, and demons. You also get a second attack at 5th level, which is pretty surprising for a cleric. But yeah, they also don't get spells, really. But again, you get unique features, and depending on the DM and their leniency and really how you want to customize your character, I think the unique feature aspect could be a lot of different things, you know? So that is pretty significant. The example gods and the idea of, you know, what the deity involves is kind of interesting. They all also have their own benefit. And they add certain spells to these spell-like blessings. I'm not quite sure how to interpret what you're supposed to do with that. Because spell-like blessings, right? Well, okay, I think those are then available for choice, because you only are rolling at level 1. And so, if you roll 7 through 12 at level 1, you're getting one of these spell-like blessings. After that, though, no matter what, you're picking. So, I think these add to that. But the part I'm not so sure about is you're supposed to pick a deity before you pick this shit. So if you're supposed to add these to your spell-like blessing selection, shouldn't you also be able to roll randomly to get those? I guess how I would do it then is like... Alright, so like if you worship Argona, you add these 2 spells to spell-like blessings. I think I'd still make it a d12, but if you roll 7 through 12 on the die, then you're going to roll like a d8 to determine which blessing it is. I guess that's how I do it. So you have a very high chance of getting a spell-like blessing, but that's true by default anyways. This just increases the limit. It is just unfortunate, like, this one adds 3, so I'd have to make it a D9. But on computers, you can absolutely do D9, and it's no problem. So deities also have tenets. Like, aid the sick and injured, and embrace toil and prosper, and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And you have to follow these tenets because you want to gain favor. You have to promote, enact, or adhere to one or more tenets. GM determines whether a tenet is met, and then favor is bestowed. You either have favor or not, so it's a binary thing. And then if you act contrary to a tenet at any point, you probably are going to lose your favor. And you can't, I think you can't actually do your blessings unless you have favor. So I think, yeah, you lose the majority of your special abilities if you don't have favor. So obviously you're going to want to pick a deity that you are going to kind of adhere to and are not going to work against. And then it is possible to get a divine rebuke from like a failed spellcasting check or something. And then you need to do atonement. And as long as you have to do atonement, you cannot gain favor, which makes sense because then you lose access to your abilities. And it's recommended that DMs give PCs the benefit of the doubt when deciding whether a tenant is satisfied as to what exactly it means to foster hope, or something, or embrace toil and prosper. But that Argona is like obviously the most sort of stereotypical cleric one. But then you get some interesting one like the Lord of Crows, who has to heed the suffering of others and stifle disease, end those that deserve death. Or Graxis, the Iron God, test your metal, live boldly. Iron and steel are hollowed metals, treat them so. Shenog, invoke trickery and guile, embrace mystery and wonder, find comfort in the night. I think this selection of example gods does cover a lot of the core sort of tenets that you'd probably find. But yeah, I like the idea of it quite a bit. I like the idea of, I guess, kind of forcing, if you're gonna play a cleric and or a cultist or whatever, and you really want to play a religious character, like, yeah, some people don't need this sort of thing. They just can do that. They can role play, they can get into it, they can embrace a character, become the character, and do all that. But I think plenty of people benefit from kind of this more mechanical prodding towards following and playing a religious character. Fighter, obviously, classic. All weapons, all armor, plenty of health, strength, smash, good. They get adaptable. It's again another D12 thing. They can kind of use it once per fight or something like that. And these are like combat styles. So if you pick two-hander here, yeah, whenever you use a melee weapon two-handed, you get advantage when rolling damage. It's pretty nice. Some of them are not as simple or clear-cut about when they're good or not. But, I mean, this two-hander obviously is like kind of always good if you're using a two-handed. That makes you better at swinging a two-handed weapon and you like it and blah, blah, blah. But then there's stuff like rear guard where you use it if you're doing a party retreat because everybody gains advantage on a party retreat. Now, most of the time that's going to be like, well, that's lame. It's useless. It's useless 98% of the time. But when you actually are doing a party retreat and everyone has to roll to get out of there, that's a fucking lifesaver, man. That's insanely good. So basically how it works is you get like 2 of these at level 1, and you're going to designate one to be your default style. And so that's just always active. You don't have to expend anything or blah, blah, blah. If your two-hander is your default style, unless you say otherwise, unless you switch temporarily, you always get the benefit of two-hander. But then in the middle of combat or, whenever, you can spend a use to switch to another style that you know. And I think it lasts until the end of the fight, or until you switch back or switch to something else. And you can always switch to your default style at any time. So I think it's really interesting. I think the big issue, or that people, it would probably bum some people out, again, much like the other stuff, is just like you can't pick. So I mean, say like, yeah, I want to play a fighter, I'm gonna get that two-handed axe, I'm just gonna fucking slaughter, and then you roll your d12 and you get dual weapon and rear guard, and it's like, fuck this life, you know. You'll get two-hander at level 2, you know, and it's and neither one is like that big of a deal. Like if you got dual weapons and you went sword and board, or you went two-hander, I mean, you wouldn't be missing out on that much. Dual weapons, if you're using two weapons and you get an extra attack and you miss with your extra attack, you get +1 to hit until you hit with that extra attack. Which is, I mean, not if you're going to use dual weapons, yeah, you want that. But it's not like the end of the world if you're not utilizing it at level 1. I think a lot of it's kind of interesting. I definitely think it's pretty interesting. And eventually you're going to have boatloads of these, and you can just like switch between stuff constantly during a fight. You know, you can switch to charger when you charge in, and then you can switch to two-hander, and you can switch to ranged if you need to shoot something, or if you need to... expert guard is another really good one. If you ever roll a critical fail on a weapon attack, you can just activate it and it becomes an ordinary miss instead. You know, stuff like that. I think it's cool. You also get Deadly Strikes, level 1. Crit range expands to 19 and 20. And your natural 19 effects also occur on a crit. So yeah, you're just better at fighting, which is usually what a fighter is. But then you get something very unique here. Like, I did not expect it. Supplies at 2nd level. Where at any time during an adventure, you may automatically add 1d4 mundane items to your equipment list. They have to have a common theme, but like, yeah, you just kind of have stuff because you naturally anticipate and prepare for dangers and obstacles that lie ahead. This isn't like the first time I've ever seen a concept like this. I think Blades in the Dark is often kind of based around that whole concept of you just like, yeah, you have supplies with you, and it's not really, you don't really determine what it is until you need it, and then there you go. 5th level, they get a 2nd attack. 7th level, their crit range expands again to 18 to 20. And if you ever hit, you can spend a reroll to get a 50% chance of parrying the attack. Alright, magic user. I know we're spending so much time. I don't know if I wanted to go through this much detail in like a let's read, but it's kind of interesting, so... Alright, yeah, so magic users are entirely based around intelligence, although they have no minimum. Like, no prerequisite of a number, which is interesting. And yeah, you can kind of tell the general gist of what they're going for magic in this system quite clearly. Magic users can use all one-handed weapons and light crossbows, which is pretty nice. And light armor. And they actually start with a longsword and leather armor, which is... that's not too common. So spellcraft, you know, a number of spells equal to your int bonus. Roll 1d100 and consult the spell list to determine which. Yes, the spell list does have 100 spells on it, and all of them are available at level 1. It's a bit of a unique system there. And then with each new level, you may learn one new spell through magical research. And you begin an adventure with one use of this ability per level. May expend a use to attempt to cast any spell you know, and regain expended uses by taking short or long rests. So, yes, as far as I understand, then it's one spell per combat at level 1. Which is, Yeah, I mean, it's no Shadow Dark, that's for sure. But it's better than old school D&D, which was like 1 per day. 1 per combat is still potentially really all you need, depending on the fight. And the fights here are obviously fairly brutal and fairly quick. So, but even if, you know, it goes on a bit longer, you can use other weapons. And there's no like Pathfinder, like attack bonuses or anything like that. I mean, if you've got a decent strength and stuff, you can get in there and swing a longsword with the best of them. So you're kind of a Gandalf figure, really. You also get Sense Magic. Check Sense Magic within line of sight of close range. Sense whether magic is present or absent and its location. On a great success, you can also confirm its general nature. Cannot detect illusions this way. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, nothing. Mostly it's about the spells, and that's why you're picking a magic user. Because it's about spells. Then you have Monk. They punch stuff. They can use spear, short sword, dagger, staff, shortbow, and sling, and light armor. And they start with a staff and a healer's kit. They all start with a healer's kit. See, that's the sort of thing you'd put in a template. It's like one of them starts with a healer's kit. I don't know, I love templates. Like my favorite aspect of Axe for some reason. But they get martial arts. Their unarmed attacks do 1d6 damage. Blunt trauma on natural 19. They can apply Dex mod to melee attack and damage rolls rather than strength. And they can do extra attacks each turn as if they were 2-weapon fighting. And the extra attack does not suffer disadvantage. So they can punch the shit out of stuff. I'm not really sure why you would use a staff ever over just punching shit. But, you know. Then they also get Monk Techniques, similar D12 list as usual. Fun kind of kung fu stuff here. Spirit Strike, Moon Shield Sun, Heaven's Leap. Strength of 1, gain Strength 19 for 1 action. It's fun. Perfection of Will, Fork the River. You know, plenty of monk shit that we expect from like a D&D monk. Crouching Tiger kind of stuff. Levels 2 on a natural 19 unarmed attack roll. It may grab, trip, disarm, or push the target a short distance. Getting a free grab on a natural 19 is pretty nice. 5th level, their unarmed attacks go up to D10. Open hand versatility applies on a natural 19 or 20. A 10% chance per hit of getting a free grab or trip. And they get extra attacks. So really, they double that. You can also get useful insights. The GM will remind you of an important piece of information, spotlight an overlook clue or connection, or provide some other kind of inspiration. Yeah, okay. Ranger. Obviously, very much Ranger kind of thing. Very Aragorn. But all of the Rangers start with a animal companion. Every Ranger just gets an animal companion. You cannot be a Ranger and not have an animal companion. That doesn't sit amazingly well with me, mostly because I don't really like DMing for a group that would have more than one animal companion. And I think probably there are people that want to play a Ranger without one, like Aragorn. I don't remember Aragorn's pet dog, but, you know. Anyways, so you get an animal companion, communicate using sound, touch, hand gestures, body language. And so these are level 1 examples you can have, like a wolf, which has... I mean, it's pretty good, to be honest. They get a D8 bite attack. They'd get +1 on their attack rolls because they're hit dice. Their AC would be, like, probably 13. If they roll a natural 19, they knock the target prone and sit on them, I guess. They can move far distance. They get advantage when tracking, and an extra +1 to attack when you outnumber the foe. I mean, pretty powerful level 1 companion. Yeah, they won't have that much health. They'll have like 6 health or something, but still. Also, you can't... Alright, you can't put hit dice 1d6. Because that implies that you should roll 1d6 and that's their hit dice number. So they could have 6 hit dice. That's not what it is. What they mean is this down here, 1d6 HP. So I don't know why that got cut off, but yeah. They also get Ranger Craft. So this is a D12 thing again, which has loads of Ranger, sort of Aragorn-related things. Some are related to shooting with bows. Some are related with 2-weapon fighting. They got, like, some herbalism stuff in there. Some stealthy kind of stuff in there. Poison stuff. Anti-poison stuff. You know. But then Steady Shot at 2nd level is entirely based around range. So I feel like they're leaning towards a ranged character here. But at 5th level, they get 2nd attack, which, you know, can certainly apply to melee. Yeah, okay. I've never really been a ranger kind of guy. I don't know if I've ever even made one in any game ever when I played in a group. So, yeah. Rogue. Classic rogue. Does all the roguey things. Gets backstab right out the gate. So if they're once per turn, when making a melee attack against a target that is surprised by you, gain +4 attack bonus, inflict an additional D8 damage. And finisher. When they hit a wounded target, so that's half health or lower, they get to add backstab damage. Not the backstab bonus, I guess, because you have to have already hit. And then you get an extra D8 damage. And they get a third thing, Tricks and Techniques, D12. Various roguey things. Flash Powder and Choking Dust, Cat's Grace. Hidden Blade, they can reroll a failed melee attack. It's pretty nice. I mean, I'm sure most fighters would pick being able to reroll a failed melee attack once per combat. It's always nice. Smoke bombs and all this kind of fun stuff. Yeah, okay. And that's it. That's all your classes. Then it goes into unique features. And these are a bunch of examples. But GMs and players are encouraged to customize what follows to suit their game and or use them as guides for their own creations. So a lot of these have 3 tiers, representing low, moderate, and high power versions. Each tier accumulates upon the last. So it's up to the DM to kind of decide for their campaign what sort of general power level they're looking at, because yeah, for some of these there is a big difference between the low power and the high power. So like Armor Master, if you just go low power, this is sort of what you're looking at for unique features. When wearing armor, you reduce all damage suffered by 2 points. Which is pretty good, and if you want to be a tanky character, and you just want kind of mechanical benefit of some kind, yeah, you know, in a low power campaign, that's what you're looking at. But then in a more high power campaign, you'd get that. You'd also be able to spend a reroll to reduce the damage of an attack by your level, and you'd be able to make luck saves to negate one physical attack that reduces you to 0 HP. At which point your armor is destroyed or requires repair. You get all that shit. And you could just have all that at level 3, you know. A lot of this also involves, like, yeah, these cross-class abilities. So you could be a fighter, but then you could pick this to get a limited version of one of the artificer's inventions. And you begin an adventure with 2 uses of the ability. But I'll be honest, if I'm playing a ranger, I'm gonna pick this and pick that fucking black powder weapon, baby. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that he included all of these as various examples, especially for really low creativity players. But I think picking any of these is kind of doing yourself a disservice as a character, as a player. And I think the big appeal of the whole thing is that they are meant to be unique features. So, you know. But yeah, I mean, some of the cross-class stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, this is the multi-class system if you want to be multi-classy. So if you want to do some spells, some spell casting, then you could pick this. And it's good to have this guideline here so that we kind of know the general power level of what the cross class of a magic user should be. You get 2 spells, one of them random, one chosen, and you begin an adventure with 2 uses of the ability and a DDM tally of 3, and we'll find out what that is. Or if you just want to gain proficiencies in melee weapon or a certain melee weapon or something like that, or get an unusual mount. I mean, there's plenty of decent. I wouldn't be shocked, you know, to have people pick some of these sometimes, but yeah, I would imagine players are going to try to squeeze every bit of juice out of the unique feature concept. As they should, because I would. And I think this really kind of makes your character your own. The unique feature should make your fighter different than everybody else's fighter that ever plays the game, you know. Okay, skills. So you get skills during character creation. Usually you get like 2 handed to you. You get 1 from your background, and then you roll for like 3 more of these kind of randomly. And then you get more skills at 2nd, 5th, and 8th level. Having a relevant skill is beneficial in several ways. You get a +1 bonus on the related attribute check, assuming that you're doing that kind of check. It's not just if the DM says, okay, we're going to need a charisma check here, and you look at your skill list and it's like, okay, well, I have deception, gather information, leadership, so I have +3 from that. It's like, no, the DM says make a persuasion check, then you get a +1. So it's not like D&D where this is going to end up being adding +12 or something to your roll for persuasion. It's a +1 if you have the skill. And some things can't be attempted if you don't have the skill. Like certain like things with like apothecary or something like that, you might need to have the actual skill rather than just anybody attempting to analyze a poison or something, you know, who knows. So the skill list is, let's see here, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17. I feel like I miscounted. 12, 15, no, 17. Okay, yeah, 17 skills. Generally, myself and obviously many other gamers have moved away from set skill lists because it's just unnecessary. Like, really, we all know what things are capable, what you can do in a game. You know, we know, just making it open-ended with like attribute checks is just a lot easier because we know the charisma is going to correspond to persuading, intimidating, deceiving, leadership sort of stuff, gathering information. I mean, we know charisma corresponds to all that. What skill lists, I guess, do is that they allow a character to specialize and kind of be crafted a little bit more in a certain direction. A character could be good at persuasion and leadership because they're like a paladin. And if you just do attribute checks, then that also makes them very good at deceiving people. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. But since these are only +1, it's kind of like, okay, you're still going to be good at it all pretty equally. So these are pretty minor concepts. The only issue is that when they're like doing something, when a player wants to attempt something, I can't just say, okay, that sounds like Dex, roll a Dex. I have to think, okay, that's let's see, that's gonna be a sleight of hand check. That's gonna be a detection. I have to remember what each thing is. But to be perfectly honest, I don't. Because it doesn't matter to me. It matters to the player. So, you know, if they say they want to do something, say they want to jump across a chasm or something, and I say, all right, roll a Dex, and they have acrobatics, they're probably going to want to mention that they have acrobatics because they want the +1. But there are some times where it's like, no, this kind of requires you have the skill or something like that. And I kind of, yeah, I mean, in general, I'm not crazy about it. Among all the things in the system here, I don't say I love the skills. And I feel like it probably could just not exist in the game. I think you could just remove these 2 pages and not much would be lost. Because again, it kind of feels like a holdover from like 5th edition D&D. You're not going to find many OSR games or new SR games that have skill lists like this. So, I don't know. It felt like the designer just couldn't let it go. So he had to put it in here. But he made it like as minor as possible. Just, yeah, it's a +1, you know. Alright, equipment. Pretty standard stuff, except that 100 copper. Oh no, yeah. So 10 copper is 1 silver, 10 silver is 1 gold. Items are either common, uncommon, rare, or very rare. And except for equipment, any sort of gear or anything like that has a randomized cost. Kind of an odd choice, but I guess it, you know, it simplifies like the gear list here. You don't have to put prices, anything. It just, they're all 1d3 silver for common gear. Uncommon gear is all 3d10. But then they kind of like, I don't know, it's skimping out on the equipment list here. This is the whole equipment list. Because the uncommon gear, this is like what he lists. This obviously isn't meant to be all uncommon gear in the game, and this isn't meant to be all common gear and stuff, but it's just like, why did common gear get this nice table, and then uncommon gear gets this ugly little, like, run-on sentence of a yellow box? I don't know. It doesn't look very good. I feel like he could do better than this. So uncommon gear is 3d10 silver pieces. Rare is 5d10 plus 50 silver pieces. And availability is questionable. So the way it does it is this supply score. So common items are generally always available in any location, but beyond that, the GM might roll on the supply scores. He has to roll equal or under this number, and if he succeeds, then you find the item for sale. Doesn't say how many. This isn't axe or anything, but oh no, there's a quantity listed. Okay, it seems kind of generous. I don't know how many of these you're going to actually be buying at once. But if that roll fails, then you have to wait a certain amount of time before doing the roll again. Uncommon is 1d6 days, rare 1d6 weeks, very rare 1d6 months. Fantastic items such as magic swords are generally not for sale. Shame, shame. Yeah, and then we get into encumbrance. PCs have item slots equal to their strength, minimum of 10. Most items take up 1 slot. 200 coins is 1 slot. 200 items, 2 slots. And then they do something interesting here where they break up your inventory into 2 halves. The first half is your battle gear. Anything in your battle gear you can just easily access during combat. Your weapons, shields, I think your armor even. And then the second half is your pack gear, which cannot be accessed in combat unless the GM decides otherwise. Oh, worn clothing and armor are exempt. Some things get bundled together, blah, blah, blah. Horses and mules have 20 item slots. So on and so forth. You can go past that limit, at which point you're encumbered. Disadvantage on checks relating to athletics, acrobatics, chases, and party retreats. Cannot charge or attempt rescues. And your exploration speed might be affected. But you can carry up to twice your strength, which is pretty generous, to be honest. And that's not even super bad to be encumbered if you're carrying treasure back. So there's a handful of rare items here listed, like thieves' tools and tripwires and magnifying glass, healer's kit. But yeah, the equipment section here, very limited. And yeah, I gotta say, this like parchment look here is just disgusting. And there's just something about this look that I really dislike. Yeah, I don't know. Alright, but then you get into weapons and armor. So these all have fixed prices. Varying damage values, blah, blah, blah. Some of them can be thrown. Some of them are second rank weapons, so you can actually use it behind an ally, assuming that they are in melee range of the target. So, you know, this is going to be stuff like spears and whips and pole arms. And then practically every weapon, every weapon's going to have a natural 19 effect. So if you're rolling a 19, attribute checks and everything, luck checks, that's all roll equal or under. But attack rolls in combat are still equal or higher against an AC. So it's a little, you know, you're going to have to get used to that. 2 different things, but yeah, it makes sense. Unless you want to go with Thaco or something, yeah, that's what you're doing. Right. So most of these are going to be trauma effects. So if you get a natural 19, you do your damage, and then you're also going to be rolling on a trauma table, which is going to do various things like cutting off ears or, you know, all sorts of grisly effects. I usually like that kind of shit, so I'm looking forward to that. But some of them are like pushing or going prone or tripping. Yeah, most of them are traumas. Some of them have some other properties. Battle Axe does +1 damage if you two-hand it instead of one hand. Daggers, if you have it equipped, is +2 initiative. Some of them are -2 initiative. I don't know if this only applies if you're the one rolling initiative. Because it's like, I doubt the fighter is going to be often with his like low intelligence or anything. I doubt he's going to be rolling initiative with his -2. So it's, or maybe you tally this all up. I don't think so. I don't know. Ammunition. They kind of use the resource die. After every battle in which you use the ammunition, there's a 1 in 6 chance that you only have enough ammo left for one more fight. And that chance increases by 1 after each battle until you restock at a village. That's pretty interesting. So it is theoretically possible for you to go into a dungeon and only be able to do 2 battles before running out of arrows, which I think if you tracked your arrows individually would practically never happen. But I don't know. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a fairly simple system. I still, if I'm going to go with a system like that, I'd probably go with the normal black hack resource die of D8, D6, D4 kind of thing. So I think you get a bit more longevity out of it, but maybe that's too much longevity. I don't know. Maybe start with a D6. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, so that's all that. Armor. Your armor class is equal to 10 plus your AC bonus plus your Dex mod. Which means that, well, there was no character that couldn't wear any light armor or anything. So, you know, light armored characters are probably going to be hovering around 11 or 12. Medium, 13, 14 maybe. Then heavy, 15, 16. Depends if you have a negative mod, though. Heavy gets to ignore the negative dex mod. Shields provide +1 AC. Pretty good. And you can also splinter the shield if you want to negate a hit. Some people don't like that rule in the OSR community because it makes hirelings way more powerful. Because they can all just splinter shields constantly, and it's just, okay, as long as you bring along 20 shields into the dungeon, your hirelings can just keep splintering them. It gets a little wacky. I think that's kind of an edge case, depending on the group and what game you're playing and stuff. Yeah, I doubt I'll ever run a game for anybody that really abuses hirelings and stuff, so you can just make it so that hirelings can't splinter shields and it's only players. But yeah, anyways. Repairs. You can repair shit. You can craft shit for 2/3 of the usual price. Maybe. It's all up to the DM. They got some prices here for animals, like a monkey. Okay. And some basic vehicles. Master Forged gear if you want to pay a lot extra and you have a Master Smith. You can get Master Forged weapons that have bonuses, armor. Again, compared to Shadow Dark, I wish Shadow Dark had just rules like this in the book as a nice a gold sink to spend all your money on. And then we get into actually playing the game and stuff. So most uncertain actions are resolved through attribute checks, attack rolls, luck rolls, montages, or random checks. Modifiers are going to be either minor modifiers or major modifiers. Major is going to be typically advantage or disadvantage. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Most gamers are familiar with the concept, and it is a little swingy depending on the action that you're attempting, the role that you're doing. But it's a pretty popular concept, and again, coming from someone that played a lot of 5th edition D&D, I'm not surprised that made it in here. Minor modifiers are going to be a 1 or 2 point swing, up or down, you know? So if you're attacking from a high place, +2 to your roll. If you're attacking like on unsteady ground or something, maybe a -2, you know, things like that. That's it. Modified attributes are capped at a max of 18 unless noted otherwise. It's interesting that he says that these are 1 to 2 point modifiers to an attribute. Which is very strange, because that's not just a flat +1 or +2 then. You'd have to go back to the fucking attribute modifiers. So, it's like if you have a 16 strength and you get a +2, that's really just a +1. I don't know if that's the intention, and I would never run it like that, because it's like, why bother? Just give me a +1 then, if you wanted me to have a +1. I don't know, it's a weird way to phrase it. And then my first thought was that the intent was because it has something to do with the great success and terrible failure stuff. But it specifically says that those are derived from the base attribute and not any situational modifiers. So I still don't get it. All right, anyways. So what is a great success, terrible failure? Great success is rolling equal to or less than half your attribute on an attribute check. So if you have a 12, if you roll a 6 or less on an attribute check, that is a great success. If you have a 18, rolling 9 or less is a great success. So the higher your stat, the more likely you're going to be getting great successes on rolls for attribute checks. Terrible failure is the other way. It's more than 1.5 times the attribute, rounded down. So if you have a 12, then a terrible failure is on a 19 or 20. And then past that, it's always going to be on a 20. Yeah, so this is not an elegant system, I think we can say. This is not a system that is just like immediately obvious to everyone and really requires no thought and is just kind of baked into the whole system. This is a little clunky, I think. The fact that you have a table here showing the great success numbers and terrible failure numbers for every attribute number, that is how you can kind of tell it's a little clunky. Especially because you don't apply any modifiers or like a +1 skill bonus. That's where it gets extra clunky. Especially based on the example they give to really home in how clunky it is. So Alyssa has Dexterity 9. She has a +2 situational bonus to what she's doing. And she has the Traps and Locks skill, so +1. For a total of Dex 12 when she attempts to disarm a trap. On a result of 12 or less, she succeeds. Okay, I guess I get what they're saying with adding it to the attribute. You're right, because your modifier doesn't matter for attribute checks. That's why. So if you get a +2, your attribute just goes up by 2 for that roll. So it goes from like 10 to 12. Because you're trying to then roll 12 or under. The modifier does not come into play. I was thrown off because it's a new system for me. But okay, anyways, my point. So she would succeed on a 12 or less. But on a result of 4 or less, because of her unmodified Dexterity 9, the outcome is a great success. Conversely, a result of 14 or more represents a terrible failure. That's where it's just like... Now, this isn't as big of a deal, and it's not as big of a deal specifically because you ignore all that. So it's kind of like the reason that it seems really clunky and annoying is actually why it's okay, and that's because of the character sheet. I looked at the character sheet. You actually write in the numbers for your great successes and terrible failures for each attribute. It's still pretty clunky, but it's not quite that bad, where you have to recalculate it or anything. And I'm still, compared to like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where they have their different tiered versions of successes, and you crit if you succeed by 10 or more over the target number. And it's just like, that is an elegant system that scales really well and just always kind of works. You always are aware of it. But the numbers in that game are drastically different. But yeah, I mean, so like if you have a 16 strength and you're doing anything related to strength, you get a great success if you roll 8 or less, which is pretty good. What is a great success? I mean, essentially it's a crit, right? But not really. Because a 1 is a crit on an attribute check. So a great success is just like, it might matter. If I hear it as a DM and the player excitedly says, I got a great success, and it's like, okay, well, we'll try to make this a little better then. So it's a degree of success better, I suppose, but it's not quite a crit. Anyways, there's opposed checks where you kind of roll off, and whoever succeeds by the greatest margin wins. Group checks where you can have the whole group roll, and as long as more than half of the group succeeds. If it's only exactly half, then there might have to be a great success or terrible failure in there. Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes a single person will roll a check for the whole group. Blah, blah, blah. Then there's montages. It's kind of like 13th Age, except you actually have a strict number here. Every time. Anytime you do a montage, you need 6 successes. These don't always have to involve rolls, I guess, because like the use of a limited resource may generate an automatic success. Great successes might count as 2 successes. Terrible failures, 2 fails. PCs take turns. They cannot employ the same course of action more than once. And you set sort of the challenge level, 3, 2, 1. And that determines how many failures before it counts as a failure. It's sort of like skill challenges, 4th edition or something like that. 13th Age does a lot of montages. They kind of heavily encourage that style. But this is definitely more codified. The 13th Age montage is more just like an excuse for characters to look awesome. There's like not even meant to be any roles involved, and players kind of narrate just all the cool shit they do during a montage, because 13th Age is a very high power superhero fantasy kind of game. This is more akin to a skill challenge, but I think, I might actually try and utilize this if I DM. Then we get into stuff like reaction rolls, activity die, influencing NPCs. The bestiary for this game actually has... Every monster has their own reaction table you can roll on instead of this generic one, which is pretty cool. Then we get to combat. Ah, okay, I skipped over that line. Alright, yeah, so... PCs... One person rolls for initiative, determines initiative for the whole party. So if they succeed by rolling equal or less than their initiative score, the party acts first. Otherwise, monsters go first. On a great success, PCs also act before any bosses and heavies. So it is possible for some types of enemies to go first, unless you get a great success. And then in future rounds, PCs must take turns rolling for initiative in clockwise order or as the GM decides. So you cannot monopolize initiative. And so thus the -2 from a 2-handed weapon can come into play. Interesting stuff. On their turn, characters take 1 action, 1 move. The player that rolled initiative has to go first, and then players go in clockwise order. But PCs can delay their turn if they want, so it's, by default just clockwise to keep things moving orderly, but you can technically act in any order you want, and so on and so forth. Morale checks, blah, blah, blah. When morale breaks, the battle usually ends. Surviving NPCs immediately flee the area if possible. But PCs may be entitled to a free attack, or the GM can just allow them to make a group luck check to automatically slay their foes and or take prisoners. So it's like, do you want to just let them flee, or do you want to kill them all? Do you want to take prisoners? Do you want to just make some attacks as they run away? I don't know. Depends on the DM. Blah, blah, blah. Movement done in range bands. So melee is hand-to-hand. Close is the current room or up to 30 feet. Far is into the next room up to 60 feet. Very far is more than 60 feet. And in some instances, DM might indicate how many moves it would take to reach something at very far. So I think that's a better system, slightly better system than Shadow Dark, which just cuts it off at far and calls far out to how far you can see, which is clearly designed for like purely dungeons. So I think this is just a bit better way of handling it. And this easily allows for like zone-based combat if you want to have a map of some kind. Moves cannot be broken up. So you can't move, attack, and then move again. Blah, 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 blah. A move does incorporate minor necessary conduct, such as opening doors, climbing ladders, swinging from a rope. Minor necessary conduct, swinging from a rope. You can charge to move twice as far with a move action, and then make a melee attack at a +2 bonus, but enemies get a +2 to attack you. You can intercept. If you're not surprised, you're not in melee, you haven't moved yet, and an enemy wishes to move within close range of you. You might be allowed to intercept. You have to make an initiative check, and if you succeed, you move yourself into melee with the enemy. And it uses your movement for the turn. But if you attempt to intercept before your first turn in a new combat, this check is made at a disadvantage. Opportunity attacks, free attacks. Any character attempting to move out of melee with an active opponent, they're going to get a free attack against them. It's a very like blanket rule. It's going to discourage moving too much compared to like Weird Wizard, where you have to use a reaction to do it. Standing up from prone costs a move unless you make a luck dex save or something. You can block off areas. Fall damage. Significant fall up to 30 feet inflicts 3d6 damage and a blunt trauma roll. And you can do a dex save to negate the trauma roll, but still taking 3d6 damage. Falls greater than that are just determined by the DM, but cannot be mitigated. Yeah, I mean, probably pretty painful. The usual is like 1d6 for every 10 feet, which is basically what this rule is. It's just counting it always as 30 feet. You can also do a party retreat, another concept from 13th Age. This is a bit more mechanical. But if the whole party wants to flee from a battle to start a round, they can have to explain to the DM how they might escape. And then they can do a group luck check. There might be modifiers if they like drop food or something like that. And if they succeed, the PCs flee with incapacitated allies over their shoulders. This may lead to a chase. If unsuccessful, GM may permit individually successful PCs to flee. And the others can attempt to flee again the next round. 13th Age has it where if the whole party agrees and they want to flee from a battle, they just do. It just happens. But they suffer like a narrative consequence. Something that they wanted to achieve is now unachievable. Or there's been some other major setback because of their decision to flee. And when I DM'd 13th Age for a brief time, that did happen. And, it was like, I definitely made it like, okay, yeah, that was a bummer. They didn't feel happy about fleeing, but they all lived. And they definitely would have all died. So, or most of them would have died. Chases, yada yada. Then you get actions. The usual stuff for actions. Accessing pack gear is not possible in combat. Battle gear, drawing, or otherwise readying it occurs as part of your action to attack or use it. So you can draw a bow and fire it as one action. But stowing a weapon and sheathing a weapon is also an action. So you can't stow and draw as one action, which is fairly typical. You can, however, drop an item for free. So you can drop a bow, pull out your sword, swing with the sword, blah, blah, blah. Melee attacks. So this is where you flip it on the head a little bit. It's a d20 plus your class attack bonus for your level plus your strength modifier. And you're rolling to equal or beat your target's AC. Strength mod adds to damage. There's some modifiers. If they're prone, +2. If you're prone, it's -2. If you're grabbed, blah, blah, blah. Outnumber enemies. So this is very simple flanking rules that they have. So if you outnumber an enemy 3-1, you have 3 of you guys in melee and they have just the 1, you get a +1 attack bonus. Now it says that they get a +2, and I guess that's just to signify like the likelihood of them hitting one of you. That's kind of an odd concept. I've never heard of the outnumbered person getting a bigger bonus to like being flanked, basically. But I mean, how else would I interpret that? Oh, no. I'm sorry. So if you have 2 on them, if there's 2 of you, then it's a +1. If there's 3 or more on one, then it's a +2. Okay, I get it now. Never mind. Yeah, okay. That makes more sense, because, okay, you have to get 3 of them together in order to get any bonus. Right. Then if you're near blind, it's a 33% mischance. Flat, if you're blind, 66% mischance, assuming you have other ways of knowing they're there. Range attacks, all very similar, but uses perception. Every time I see perk, I'm going to think like Percocet, so it's weird. You can shoot if you're in melee, but you get disadvantage. If the target is in melee, they get a +2 AC. And if the attack misses, there's a 33% chance of re-rolling the attack against an ally in the same melee. Blah, 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 blah. Crits, if you get a natural 20, it's max damage plus half your level. Fumbles are a natural 1. If you're in melee, target gets a free attack against you. If the target is distant and they have a readied ranged or thrown weapon, they immediately return fire. And if the target's distant and in melee with an ally, the fumble attack is re-rolled against a random ally in the melee. So that's a guaranteed roll against a random ally in the melee, whereas if you miss normally, it's a 33% chance. You can also use your action to dodge. So you have advantage on dex checks and dex saves, and enemies suffer disadvantage on attack rolls against you. For a tank, it's pretty powerful. It's not just like one attack against you. All enemies suffer disadvantage on all attack rolls against you until the start of your next turn. Man, I feel like I'm going through this rulebook in way more detail, way slower than we haven't even gotten to spells yet, and we're almost 2 hours into this. But I guess it's a let's read. All right, exploits. This is, like I said, of like Dungeon Crawl Classics, Mighty Deeds of Arms for fighters, warriors, whatever. They come in a couple flavors of exploits. Minor exploits can be attempted by any combatant, so monsters can attempt these as well. They are limited to one target. They have very short durations usually, or instant durations, and they represent a lot of the kind of minor combat options, like tripping, pushing, disarming, grabbing. All of that is rolled up into minor exploits. So if you want to grab something, it's just part of this. If you want to trip them, it's part of this. If you want to throw sand in their eyes, pocket sand, it's part of this. So basically you just have to hit a target and you cause damage to the target, and then you declare what exploit you want to do. Okay, so for example, you might want to knock an opponent off his feet, grab hold of him with one hand, drive him backward a short distance, or throw him through a window. So that would be, okay, make an opposed strength check. So it's not guaranteed. It doesn't automatically happen. So it's a little different than the Mighty Deed of Arms. And you can only attempt this if you already hit them and done damage to them. But that means that there's really not much reason not to do this. Except if you fail a minor exploit, you cannot attempt any more minor exploits the rest of the combat. Which I think is a really good rule. Because otherwise, players are just going to be fucking constantly doing this shit. And that's really going to slow down and bog down combat. As it is, it's only going to mostly bog down combat. Because honestly, why would you not? Why would you not? If you're a melee dude, there is zero reason, really, why every time you hit an opponent, you wouldn't try to just trip them. Because, you know, you trip them, and they either have to waste their move in order to stand back up, or, you know, someone else might get a +2 to attack them. Or if, they already went this turn, and then you go, you know, you might go, you hit them, you knock them down, and then you reroll initiative again at the start of the round, and your whole party gets to go again, and you all just beat the shit out of him while he's still prone because he hasn't had a chance to get up. I mean, there's just zero reason to attempt it. Or there's zero reason not to attempt this. But yeah, then you can also like throw dirt in an opponent's eyes, temporarily blinding them for one round, an opposed dex check, or an opposed dex check to disarm an opponent. But really, yeah, anything sort of fucking cat. Any sort of minor little effect that's instant or very short duration. In another example, while fighting some wolves, he attempts to throw one off of a cliff. Rolls a 16 to hit, causes 3 points of unarmed damage. GM calls for an opposed strength check to determine whether the wolf is flung over the edge. I think, yeah, the idea is definitely going to be somewhat in a narrative basis. So I think if you have like a two-handed sword and you say that you want to like throw someone through a window, that's not really going to make a lot of sense. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. You could just hold the sword in one hand and then throw him through the window. So I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it's a pretty damn flexible system for a lot of just all that sort of stuff that normally has rules written out. Grabbing, disarming, pushing, you know, throwing, wrestling, you know, all this sort of stuff. And it has a lot of freedom on top of that. Okay, but then there's major exploits, and these are exclusive to player characters. So this is stuff like shattering someone's weapon, grabbing an enemy in each hand and cracking their skulls together to stun both of them, cutting off a wyvern's wing, or decapitating an ogre. Some examples include spearing a T-Rex in one eye, giving it a 33% miss chance, finishing off a fearsome witch hunter by trampling him with a horse and carriage, and making wild swings with a cold iron flail to drive away 3 shades clustered around a fallen ally. So these can affect more than one target, and can result in very serious and permanent effects, including death. And they're really limited only by imagination and the scenario at hand. One thing they don't ever do is increase hit point damage to a single target. So even though that one example was spearing a T-Rex through the eye, that should not involve more damage than you would have normally inflicted. And that's pretty easy because this is determined after you've already rolled damage against an enemy. So it's easy to remember that it's not going to do any more damage. But it could increase your total damage because it could affect multiple targets. If you want to do a big-ass cleave action with your sword to hit 5 goblins, that might apply. Major exploits cannot instantly kill or incapacitate a single target unless the target's hit dice are equal to or less than the PC's level. So you can't be a level 1 character and say, alright, I'm going to charge in with my sword and I'm going to chop the ogre's head off. You know. And you roll and you hit him and you do like a D8 damage. You know. Then you can't just suddenly say, like, alright, yeah, you kill the ogre and he's decapitated. Decapitated. So I think that's a fair rule. And the GM has final say on whether a proposed exploit is possible, taking into account character's class and skills. So class is relevant there. A wizard is not going to be leaping off of the chandelier to decapitate some dude. But it is pretty flexible, and I would say, you know, magic users probably can do stuff with magic that's not strictly related to individual spells or something. You know, who knows? So you roll attack, damage as normal, blah, blah, blah. Or you make other relevant tests, such as a riding test for a horse-based exploit. Is this the first usage of the phrase horse-based exploit in an RPG book? Possibly. Possibly. Then you declare the intended exploit. GM decides whether it's possible. You make a luck check. GM decides what modifiers apply, if any. And if you succeed, the exploit occurs, and your luck goes down by 1. If it fails, you cannot attempt any further major exploits at combat. And if you terribly fail, then you get a big, nice penalty. So, much less likely to succeed. Because minor exploits are going to be like opposed checks or maybe attribute checks or something like that. You know, just a non-opposed check of some kind. But that's going to be largely based on your attributes. Here, largely based on your luck. So definitely more likely to fail, but a lot bigger effect if they succeed. And it's the same concept of, yeah, you can't attempt any more major exploits this combat. Depending on how many players you have and how often they're attempting exploits of both types, it could get a little annoying to keep track of. But like overall, I really like the idea. Kind of have to see it in practice to see how it plays out, to see how annoying it is or how tedious it is. How often are people just going to be tripping every single round of combat, and that's the whole game, is just people tripping constantly? I don't know. We'll see. Then there's also rescues. This is once per adventure, so very rare, very uncommon. A player character can attempt a rescue to protect another person or thing. It has to be within close range, and they can attempt to negate or reverse an adverse effect for another player or NPC. This is exclusive to PCs. They have to explain how it might be possible, depending on the situation. GM decides whether it's possible. Rescuer has to make an initiative check first, and then a luck check. And if both of those are successful and the GM is okay with it all, then you can rescue. So if someone's about to die, or, you know, someone's about to get blasted or fall off a cliff or who knows what, yeah, I mean, you may as well. You can get a terrible failure and you might both get caught in whatever the disaster is. But yeah, most of the time, it's a nice way to save someone's life. Once per adventure. Per player character. Some other miscellaneous rules then for different fighting styles. We don't have to go over all these. Various other miscellaneous factors such as underwater combat and invisibility. Handful of conditions like fatigued, grabbed, dazed, prone, stunned, death and injury, blah blah blah. So when you get to 0 hit points in combat or otherwise, you fall unconscious and you're either dead or dying, but no one knows which until after the battle or situation is over and someone takes a look at you. At which point you will then make a death save. You have to roll equal to or under 10 plus your con or will mod. Any healing magic applies a +2 bonus to the save, does not stack, does not restore any HP. If you succeed on that, you are dying. Otherwise, you are dead, and that is it for you. So that means if you go down to 0, you have like a 55% chance to not be dead, which is okay. I mean, it's better than just dying at 0. So there's that. If there's some healing magic thrown on you, which, need I remind you, is pretty unlikely, then, you know, that might be like a 65% chance or so. If you're dying, then you have to be stabilized. As long as there's no immediate danger and someone is there to give you aid, you're restored to 1 hit point after 1d3 minutes. And then you have to roll a d20 roll on the injury and setback table. Which could be stuff like, you have a fractured neck or something and you permanently lose a con. Or possibly you've lost a hand. Or an eye or a foot or something. I mean, there's some bad stuff here. So definitely not a low lethality kind of game. It's nicer than just dying at 0, but much like Axe, like it's a little scary. You don't really want to go down to 0. Then we go into all the trauma tables, different types of attacks, damage you might take. So blade trauma, yeah, ligament slash, stabbed eye, bleeding out, severed neck or something. I mean, some of these blade traumas can just kill targets outright. So rolling a 19 in combat to get a trauma roll can be pretty good, and again, amplifies the lethality of the combat and the brutality and the quickness of it, because enemies generally also get these trauma rolls on a 19. Healing. After a significant combat, as determined by the DM, you can spend a few minutes to recover and 10 injuries in a short rest. Characters make 2 willpower checks, and for each success, they gain 1 recovery benefit. They can recover half of any lost hit points. If they choose that option twice, it's 3/4. They can recover 1 use of an expended class ability, recover 1 reroll. If they get a great success, they can recover 1 attribute point, except for luck. So if you lost some strength or something. Obviously, hit points is a pretty big deal, but also recovering uses of expended class abilities is going to be pretty common as well. So willpower actually quite important for basically every character. I would say every character. Because you also get rerolls back and stuff. Even if you're not losing health, you're probably spending class ability uses. Like the magic user, I mean, he's going to want to always succeed on willpower checks to get back his spells. So, yeah, pretty interesting. If you have a healer's kit, character can make an int apothecary check, and if they're successful, they can convert 1 failed recovery will check into a success for someone. Just once per short rest. There's also some other items you can grab, smelling salts and poppy milk and things to help with injuries. If you sleep overnight for at least 6 hours, you generally restore 1 hit point. Pretty rough. But if you're sleeping at a safe and comfortable location, like an inn, you get 2 hit points. Which corresponds to like that 1d3 and stuff that a lot of old school games give. Certainly no Shadow Dark, though. Long rest is 7 days, predominantly low-key activity in a safe location. If you do any strenuous activity or battle, extends the period by 1 day. But at an inn or other safe and comfortable location, it might reduce that time. All your hit points recovered, all expended class abilities recovered, all expended rerolls, all attribute loss recovered except for luck, and you recover 1 point of luck. And remember, this game is designed around a sandbox hex crawl campaign, so there's often not much preventing players from doing this at a safe home base. But that's why it's important for a DM to run a living world where things do happen if the players are just sitting around resting for weeks. But I would say, yeah, this is probably not that crazy. But it depends. It depends. If you're in the process of clearing out a dungeon or something, resting for a week back home, things are definitely going to happen in that dungeon. Or they should. Okay, sorcery. So you have to make, spend an action, make a successful int arcane lore check. And then regardless of whether it's successful or not, you have to make a dark and dangerous magic roll. You cannot cast the same spell more times than your int mod per day, so nothing is getting around that limit. And normally level 1 you can only cast once per combat. So, yeah. That means with 2 spells or something. Was it 2 spells you start with? It's based on your int modifier, so yeah, it's probably 2. So level 1, 2 spells. Neither one can be cast more than twice per day. And you can only cast 1 spell per battle, most likely. Maybe less, but I don't think no more than that. So that means at most you're going to have a spell for 4 battles per day. Which is a lot better than 1 spell per day. But yes, it's still pretty limited compared to like Shadow Dart. Then depending on the roll, if you get a great success, it's extra potent, depending on the spell description. If you get a terrible failure, the DDM effect is automatically triggered. So the DDM, Dark Dangerous Magic, that's what DDM stands for, of course. Every time you attempt to cast a spell, invoke a blessing without favor, use a magical item, or activate some other magical effect as the GM determines, you have to roll this. And depending on your level, it's the type of die you roll. So at levels 1 to 3, it's a D8. You roll a D8 whenever you attempt any of that shit. And if you roll a 1, then you have one of these D100 DDM effects. If it doesn't occur, then that chance increases by 1. So the next time you do it, and you get a 1 or 2. Then a 1, 2, or 3. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. Until you get a DDM effect. So it's certainly possible for a level 1 magic user to go a while without getting one. But it's also not that unlikely for it to happen. And most of these are pretty bad. They're obviously bad. That's the whole point of a dangerous magic system. The thing is, and the complaint I already saw from somebody else, is that they are just kind of over the top and a little ridiculous. You're growing horns. So you can be a level 1 spellcaster. You cast their first spell ever, and you grow horns out of your skull that last for 1d12 months. Or you grow a third eye. Or one of your hands turns into a big claw like District 9. Things like that can happen. Just right out the gate. A lot of the other effects are just like immediate kind of, like you go into an astral coma for 2d6 minutes with no save. Or something like that. Sprout large wings. Jesus. Or there's a lightning storm. Or you personality reverse to that of a 8-year-old for 1d12 days. Yeah, I mean, I could see this being a system that gets thrown out entirely from some DMs. I could see this being a system that gets the table completely rewritten to something more that they prefer. I could see taking some other kind of corruption mechanic for spellcasting. I don't remember exactly how Warhammer Fantasy ever does it, but that's obviously one of the most popular sort of corrupting magic systems. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I kind of have to play with it and see it in action before I'm like, yeah, this is really shit, or maybe it's cool. I don't know. I kind of like random effects. I mean, I created a magic bag that had 1,000 different effects, and we just, fucked around with that and destroyed multiple campaigns with it. But yeah. Divine Blessing and Rebuke. So this is the cultist spellcasting. If they have favor, they can spend it to automatically invoke a blessing. If they don't have favor or don't spend it, I think maybe it's just if they don't spend it. I don't think they can even do this if they don't have favor. but I'm not quite sure. Maybe you can, even if you don't have favor. But I don't know, it seemed to imply... I'm not sure. But you roll a Divine Lore check, and that's treated like a spellcasting check, and you have to roll in the DDM table. Well, no, you have to do the DDM roll, and if you trigger it, you roll in the Divine Rebuke table instead. So D100 religious-related effects, such as Unbidden Heresies, and Silent Torment, Toll of Mortals. It's all pretty similar, but obviously less like magical corruption that turns you grow antlers and shit. It's more like mental effects and stuff like that. In some instances, removing a Divine Rebuke requires cultists to complete a Rite of Atonement. So here's a D20 list of them, such as going on a pilgrimage, or self-flagellation, or personally slaying a sapient creature faithful to an opposed god. I think there's some fun stuff here. So you might get struck mute, cannot speak or invoke blessings for 1d4 weeks, but you can do atonement to end that. And then you might have to slay a dangerous foe single-handed, then perform a 1d4 hour offering ritual, giving up 50 silver pieces. Or just don't speak or invoke blessings for 1d4 weeks. Then we get to the actual spell list. So it's a D100 table, but everything is 2s, so there's actually only 50 spells. But PCs may research their own, so you can come up with sort of anything. There were some limits, though, like no spell should allow teleportation or resurrection or something like that. It would take a long time to go through all the spells, so I'm not really going to do this. But again, any of these are available at level 1, so there's no like tiered spell lists or anything. Some of them are empowered depending on your level. Like Blast of Frozen Ruin is a cone-shaped blast attack of ice, and targets suffer 1d6 damage per caster level. So that sort of scales with you. But a lot of these are just the same power at level 1 as they are at level 9. There's not really any difference. Like Elemental Ward. Target is immune to one kind of damaging energy or other dangerous element, commonly fire, lightning, or cold. And then on a great success, you may choose a more unusual supernatural hazard, such as a Shade Strength Drain, Ghost Agent Attack, or a Spectre's Level Drain. That's the same spell at level 1 or level 9. Like, there's no difference there. And I think, actually, most of these are not altered, depending on your level. Like Dark Slumber causes 4d4 hit dice worth of living humanoids in a close-sized area to fall asleep. Lower hit dice humanoids are targeted first. Luck will save to resist. Targets of 5 hit dice or more are immune. So even if you're level 9, you got Dark Slumber on you, and you cast it, targets of 5 hit dice or more are still going to be immune. So there's definitely a lot of utility spells here, like in combat, but then there's also some stuff like Echo of Days, which lets you look back in time and stuff. There's damaging things like Hellblast, which is basically just Fireball, and they didn't want to call it Fireball. You know, there's various things here. Certainly don't mind rolling randomly on this table, but also, I don't know. I like spell lists. I mean, look at how many pages is this spell list, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of this rulebook are the spells. That is a very small number for someone like me. Compare that to Shadow of the Weird Wizard, which I think is like 80 pages. That gets me tingly when I think about that. Or Shadow of the Demon Lord with Occult Philosophy supplement. You're talking like 200 pages of spells or something ridiculous. So yeah, 8 pages, very light. And obviously it's a low fantasy game. So, magic is not a focal point of this. It's meant to be a grittier world where magic does not solve everyone's problems. But for that reason, I'd say in general, this is probably a system I'm more interested in DMing for other people than playing myself. Just because I like magic a lot. It's like one of my key aspects of enjoying fantasy RPGs. So, but we'll see. There's also ritual magic. This is much more free form. Takes at least 2d6 days to perform and has a lot of price. That has a lot of cost. And the caster has to pay like a personal price, like aging or losing a con or something, which is either permanent or until the effect wears off. And most of these effects are meant to be long-lasting or permanent. That's kind of the whole, like, you're imposing a long-term magical effect on an object, area, or creature, such as building a... there were some examples here. Yeah. Enchanting a talisman, calling a familiar, conjuring an elemental, binding a pair of shades to guard a tomb, setting a lightning rune trap, creating persistent illusion, etc. So, it's pretty free form, but it's meant to be like a persistent effect. It's not like, okay, I want to do a ritual here and I want to make it rain or something, and tell me how long it takes. But still, any sort of freeform magic system is usually good. Then you go into downtime stuff. We can kind of skip over all this, but I do want to point out the XP system, which has 3 options. One is just milestones. That's downtime level up. Pretty much any time when they finish an adventure, or 2 adventures, or 3 adventures, you can just have everyone level up. There's session advance, where you do the same thing, but every adventure they get a partial level advance. So they pick like one bonus that they're going to get with their level up, such as their new hit points or attribute or class ability or something, and they can just pick that right away. And you keep doing that until they have their full level up, and then that's it. The issue I have with that, of course, is that each level for each class can be different. Like, I think some classes might get a different amount of new stuff. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that. But, and then there's XP. So there's an XP chart, 10 XP to get from 1 to 2. And then the different activities give different XP. So loot. I think this is where the majority of your XP is going to come from. Because any sort of loot, you know, I haven't looked at the treasure list, but yeah, loots of all types is going to get you XP. Combat, as long as it's significant foes or above, or you save someone from severe injury or death, or you successfully retreat from a losing battle even, will get you XP. But yeah, it's always a little tricky to adjudicate, like, what is a difficult foe versus a very difficult foe. But yeah, I mean, it's up to the DM regardless to kind of decide how much XP to throw out there. Exploration into new, untamed, or unexplored areas. Discovering secret doors or detecting traps. Solving riddles. If you explore 90% of an adventure site, you get 3+ XP. It's like, guys, we gotta 100% this dungeon. We gotta get our full XP. It's a little gamey, but sure. Then there's also social XP, such as influencing various NPCs, or even like role-playing stuff can give you XP. Which suggests that different characters, yeah, XP awards might be given to individual PCs or the whole party. And then there's also bonus XP, which is just milestones and various things like that. I generally always do milestone, but I am, trying to learn and appreciate an actual XP system. Much like I did when I first started role-playing. So I think this is fairly good. I mean, you're rewarding players based on various activities that they're doing. And it's not just gold as XP. I mean, there's You can get XP for doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah, okay. Black market trading, carousing. So much like Shadow Dark, you can spend money during downtime to get XP. Each 20 silver spent gives you 1 XP up to a max of 5 from levels 1 to 3. So, yeah, from level 1 to 2, half of that XP can come from just throwing 100 silver at a party. And then you roll on this carousing table, which is pretty big. It's a D100 table. Gambling, pets, monstrous pets, potion brewing, recovery, research, magical research. And this does allow magic users to possibly create their own unique spells, which is always fun. Yeah, various things. And then you get into the DM book. The DM advice, tools, rules, all that sort of stuff. Stuff like diseases, parasites, going through a dungeon with marching orders, random events in a dungeon. I was not a big fan of their random dungeon rolls. You know, it's a 2d6 every turn or something like that. And, oh no, they sort of do the underclock, actually. They do this dungeon tally that starts at 0, and they add 1 anytime players spend time or make noise or anything like that. You add more to the dungeon tally, and then once it hits 6, you roll 2d6. And on a 6 to 8, a random encounter occurs. But then there's all sorts of other stuff. And it's like, you have the underclock system there. Just finish the thought, you know? Go all the way. Because with this system, it's like, we could go a very long time with a reasonable chance of not ever having a random encounter. I get the idea of mixing it up a little bit with some of these things, like using up a resource along the way, or finding a clue or piece of gear. I mean, there actually could be a good thing here. You could find a potential ally or something like that. But that's sort of all represented, usually with the random encounter. I know some DMs just make it like random combat, but it's not meant to be that. I don't know. I'd probably have to try it. I shouldn't knock it too much. And it does say you can roll the 2d6 anytime PCs draw attention to themselves, are overly indecisive, or there's a natural lull. And this is really meant to be more of like a GM tool to assist you to kind of keep dungeons a little interesting. And that's why it's not just necessarily random encounters. Because if you're a DM that just likes random encounters and does that, then you already know how to do that. Roll your 1d6 every turn and be happy about it. Then rules for exploration, traveling, I mean, blah, blah, blah. This is all... I mean, yeah, I'd have to read all this to really make a determination. Random encounters while traveling, pretty simple. Okay, so for most tables, roll 1d20 during the day. And I think this is the table here, the 1d20. So you get a random encounter on a 3, a 7, 11, a 15, a 19. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Alright, so a 25% chance of a random encounter. Which is actually higher than like a 1d6, depending on how often you're supposed to roll this. On entering a hex, exploring a hex, travel event. Consult the bones to see if a travel event occurs. Okay, well, we have to go to page 212 to find out what consulting the bones means. But I assume that's just their oracle. So, I don't know, maybe a 50% chance every hex. Although I don't think that's every hex. Based on this procedure, that's after the day shift. So once per day of traveling or exploring or something, you have a 50% chance to have a 25% chance of a random encounter. But some of these are also pretty bad, like overwhelming numbers of enemies or rivals blocking the party's present course. So that's where you might have the whole field of orcs in front of you or something like that. Interesting. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah, I might have to try it. And then there's encounter tables for city, towns, villages, deserts, jungles, mountains, hills, forests, so on and so forth. I think this is all pretty solid stuff to have here. Then you get into rules for hirelings, which is always nice to see. Madness. Always a little questionable when it comes to like realism and stuff. But it is fantasy, so this is like fantasy madness, I guess. But then you throw like OCD in, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Some people really have issues with like madness tables like this, and it's like, you now have OCD. Please act out your OCD. Okay, I guess. Rules for mass battle. That's always a surprise to see in a game like this. Especially considering it doesn't have rules for domain play. And then we get to the bestiary. As I said, there's definitely some unique stuff in here that's not just like classic D&D stuff. It's been renamed and altered in various ways. There's a lot of classic stuff in here. I mean, it's a fine bestiary. It's just, again, not particularly big. So you have like what's a classic enemy here? A goblin. All right, so here's your goblin. Gives a little description of goblins. Sunlight is painful to their eyes and they're near blind. And there's also hobgoblins, which are highly rare and reclusive goblin sorcerers. Gives a number of appearing, which is nice to see. They appear in groups of 4d6, which is a lot. They have 11 AC, 1d4 hit points. They have a 1d6 bite attack. So they don't use weapons, they just bite. On a natural 19, they get a bonus bite attack. Their stats, blah, blah, blah. They have a luck of 3. They have advantage on stealth-related checks. And then every monster has their own reaction table. I'm sure plenty of these are copy-pasted, but yeah, I'm not sure actually. So I think that's really handy. I think that's great. But yeah, this is definitely more in the OSR vein. You're not going to have creatures with just gobs of special abilities or anything like that. They're all going to be relatively simple. And it is broadly compatible with actual old school modules and stuff. Considering we're using AC, hit dice, you know, that kind of stuff. So relatively easy to just translate. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's fine. It's fine bestiary. Compared to Shadow Dark, I think Shadow Dark has a lot more of just like classic monsters. And I think it's a bit bigger of a bestiary. I think there's more entries in the Shadow Dark one. I don't know. I'd probably give the edge to Shadow Dark's bestiary. But they're pretty close. I don't know. It's just like me, I'm a very classic kind of person. I don't like things weird and gonzo and mixed up. Like, I don't need scrats, all right? I don't need scrat. Just call it rat folk and call it a day. And then when I look, I was like, okay, I want a rat folk here. I'm going to look up rat folk. And that's it. Now I have to think, oh, wait, they don't have rat folk. Oh, yeah, it's a scrat. It's like, I get it. It's just like people, when they make their own setting, it's like, yeah, this is mine. It's very unique and it's my own and blah, blah, blah. I will point out Shadow Dark does not have rat folk. But yeah, like Scorn being basically orcs, but not really orcs because they're pink-skinned proto-humans, cannibals and stuff. But the stats are essentially an orc. Yeah, it's fine. And the artwork is pretty decent and stuff, so it's fine. Shockingly, they have 4 different types of zombie stat blocks. Brain Eater zombies, Giant zombie, Walker zombie, Zombie swarm. Why do zombies got so much love? You have 1 goblin and 1 scorn stat block. Then you have rules for naval combat, which is interesting, and then oracle tools, consulting the bones. Which, yeah, I would really never use this because I don't want to use your special dice. And I'm just going to use some other oracle. There's also the deck of signs, which is like a tarot deck. I'm also never going to use that. Rival adventurers. Solo rules. If you want to play just a single solitary character. You start at level 3. You get a shit ton of hit points to start. You get a bonus melee or ranged attack in combat. And every time you suffer a hit, you roll a fortune die, possibly negating it. Or counter-striking. Short rest, you get 3 willpower checks instead of 2, blah, blah, blah. And if the PC is facing 5 or more enemies, halve their number. Huh. And then he has advice for running actual modules by yourself. Which, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what I do when I do that. So it's all fine. And random dungeon generators. Seems nice. Discussions about traps. And then treasure table. So you have carry loot A, which is the lowest value. This is like what the total spoils of a small group of enemies will have on them. Okay, carry loot B. Larger silver amounts. And this is where it's going to start worth XP. So this is treasure that you're generally going to have to actually find rather than just looting off Scorn's corpses. Valuables A. Lesser art objects, potions, scrolls. Valuables B, major art objects. Trinkets and curios. Sort of, oddities, little oddities. Touch of mystery to them. And then lair treasure. This is the big finale that you get. Minor magical items, potions, scrolls, spell books. Go on and so forth. We're kind of wrapping up here. Major magical items. Yep. Plenty of cool stuff that I'll never see. Some variant rules. If you want to do 4d6 drop low. Players get to pick skills, starting abilities. Get a unique feature at level 1. You can make the game more deadly, less deadly. Give them more HP on level up or something. For less dark but no less dangerous magic mishaps, download the Perilous Magic table from our website. Well, now I gotta see this. We're gonna get this right now. Do they even have a website? Do they even have a web? They do. Well, Pickpocket Press has a website. Okay, that's good. I don't see Perilous Magic anywhere. Perilous Magic. Okay. Oh, no. No. Okay. It's on their fucking Discord. Ridiculous. Yeah, so technically this file that I got off drive-through is like labeled as the version 10 playtest or something. And I think it's still like getting shipped out to Kickstarter backers, like the physical copy and stuff. So, I don't know. Maybe they just forgot about the Perilous Magic thing, or I don't know. I'm sure we'll see it at some point. Damn. It's like in Jurassic Park when they're disappointed they don't see the T-Rex or whatever, or the Gallimimus or whatever the fuck it is. Anyway. You can do individual initiative each round. You can do simultaneous actions. Just You can add strength to thrown weapon damage. You can go beyond 9th level. Yeah, okay. If individual skills are not your style, ignore the skill list and expand the backgrounds rule to include class and race. If an action is closely connected to a character's class, race, or background, they gain +1 bonus on any required attribute check, and may use a reroll if desired. Honestly, I'd lean towards that way, because that's how just so many other games work, and it's just so easy and free form. It does require players to speak up a little bit more to kind of like defend themselves and be like, well, I'm a fighter, so I think this would be a +1. But at the end of the day, it's a +1. If they're going to bother making a case, you know, most of the time it's probably fine, unless they're the type of person that's just like, well, I'm a fighter, and this check involves living and existing in a universe, so I want a +1. You know, at that point it's like, no, you're never getting a +1 ever again, so please don't ask. Anyways, then some conversion tips for converting from other systems, such as BX, OSE, Shadow Dark, AD&D. Pretty simple stuff. 5th edition. 5th edition tends to have more health. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Converting treasure. This is where it talks about, like, just swapping out the treasure to one of the treasure piles, but you can stick with just coin amounts, but drop down from plat to gold, gold to silver, silver to copper. Blah, 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 and that's it. That is Tales of Argosa. Okay, this took way longer than I thought. I was planning on making the characters here, starting the adventure, but then I start doing the let's read, and it's just like, I feel like going through it in such detail. So there you go, there's the first video, I guess. We went through the rulebook. So next time, we'll make some characters, which will be fun. And then we'll get started on Ironwood Gorge, which will be fun. And we'll see how it all goes. We'll cast some spells and swing some swords and... I mean, Ironwood Gorge definitely going to have quite a bit of combat, so there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, overall, I like a lot of what I see here. There's just a couple things that I'd be like, eh, or there's a couple things that I kind of need to just see in practice to decide how I feel about it. Yeah, I guess we'll see. It's tough. I mean, Shadow Dark, for this sort of kind of OSR style of higher lethality and stuff, Shadow Dark's pretty high up there because it's just so easy to hack and it's so free form. But then on the flip side, if I want something really crunchy with just insane character customization, it's really hard to beat, like Shadow the Demon Lord or Weird Wizard. So I'm not quite sure where Tales of Argosa is going to fit in. My hope was that it's going to be just a slightly crunchier Shadow Dark. And it's kind of looking that way. But is that something that I really needed? I don't know. We'll find out. Not today, though. For now, my name is Mang. This has been solo role manging Tales of Argosa. I'll see you fine folks in the next part.